Hello everyone, my name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. Hi, hello. Yes, I'm starting this video at 2 a.m. because I forgot it was a thing. I forgot I was gonna do a video about this. I am going to be plotting Sage's story, the entire series of it. Should have started this a few days ago because for the past 3 days, I have been picking at this story. And last night and tonight, I kind of had a brainwave for each of the 3 books. Not in any like super detail, but in enough detail to like have a general sense of where each of the stories are gonna go. So I have this little notebook here. It is like super little, kind of a trash notebook that I got like in a bag of something. And I decided to crack this open a couple nights ago. I decided to kind of treat it treat thinking about this trilogy, because it's gonna be a trilogy, as this 3-act structure. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to kind of do like book 1 is act 1, book 2 is act 2, book 3 is act 3, etc. And then I did I laid it out like this. So you have an opening image, book 1, book 2, book 3, and then final image. So kind of like how I know where we're starting the story and then also ending the story, like what I want the feeling to be for my characters. And so book 1, I have mostly plotted out in my head, discovering a mystery, learning about the world and the rules of the world, and there's a couple things that like Sage is doing because Sage is my main character, and like specifically to her growth, you know, what they figure out at the end of the book and what they find out about this world, and like cracks everything open. And then book 2 is going to be trying to find a way to take this threat down, that kind of thing. And then also like from what I know about reading stories in series, especially ones that I really, really love, like for example, The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. I know that the second book took everything that we learned in the first book and ripped it apart, turned it on its head, and made everything just so much worse. Like, not that everything we learned in book 1 was wrong, but like the reality of the situation just got so much more intense, you know? So like remembering that kind of thing, like how can I upend the rules? How can I bend things, you know, thinking like that. And then book 3, essentially just like trying to save the world, you know, trying to take down the threat again, etc., etc. And then I know what's going to happen at the end of book 2, which is a big important point that I was like, okay, this is something that I was inspired by when I was reading the Foundry Side trilogy by Robert Jackson Bennett. I was inspired by Shorefall, one very, very, very tiny element in Shorefall. I was like, well, what if this? And like it just spun my brain out into a million threads. I know book 1, and I knew what was like the trajectory of book 2, and I kind of knew like vaguely what I wanted in book 2, and then book 3 I knew really vaguely. And so on the next couple pages, last night and tonight, I ended up doing like 1-page rapid summaries of like what each book is going to be. So I did book 1, and also within these I did like the main subgenre that I'm going to do, because I also saw a TikTok the other day, because I don't know how to write series. I've never written a connected series. The only kind of series that I've written is Paramount books, which each book stands on their own. Yes, they're set in the same world. Yes, they have the same characters in the world, but they follow different characters and they're different stories, and they're contained and self-contained. You can read them out of order, etc. Right? So I've never written a proper trilogy of like connected stories and stuff like that. One big connected storyline. So I was looking up TikToks briefly to see if anyone had like any tips or whatever. One person vaguely, and I even like Googled it just to see if like I could find any like preliminary stuff before I actually do like a deep dive into this, and like watch videos on YouTube and stuff like that. I just wanted to do like quick tips on TikTok and like a quick Google, and in one of those places, I cannot remember which place, I ended up finding someone who said that make each book as good as it can be. Like make sure each book stands very, very well on its own. And one thing you can do for that is to make each book a unique like subgenre of its own, which I thought was kind of an interesting way to look at it, to make like each of your books in your trilogy kind of really stand out and be really good. Because one of the things I'm terrified about is the second book syndrome. If you guys know me, I hate bridge books. That's what I usually call them, the bridge book. It's the book in the middle of a trilogy that just sags to get all of the information that you need for the third book to rise, you know? Like book 1's amazing, book 2 is in the shitter, and then book 3 is awesome. I don't want my trilogy to be like that. I want each book to have its own storyline, its own point, its own thing going on, but like all interconnected in the same structure, you know? So when I thought about that, I was like, oh, having like a different subgenre for each book would kind of be fun. I think it'd be kind of fun to do. So for book 1, I automatically knew, like, because of what my brain was spiraling out earlier this year when I was reading Shorefall, I knew it was going to be a fantasy mystery. So I was like, great, okay, so fantasy mystery adventure, because that's what's happening. I have never written a summary for a book like this, but I like doing it before I've even written it now, because I hate writing summaries for books. This is something that I've discovered when I was trying to query my middle grade project dream a number of years ago. I exclusively sought out agents who didn't want a summary of the book, probably to my detriment. because I don't have an agent. That book is not published and I have not heard from like anyone, and it's been years. Anyways, I need to get better at writing summaries, but this is the fun exercise that I was doing that I just basically told myself really point blank what's happening, basically like plot wise, not really focusing on any one character, because I know that's not really back of book stuff, but like I needed to know that just plot wise. And then I started on book 2 yesterday and I wrote like, after discovering a redacted, I don't want spoilers, is growing on a redacted, team decides to figure out how to take it down. And then I wrote main subgenre fantasy quest adventure. And after letting it sit for like a day, today I came back to it and I was like, okay, so I have these pieces of what I know. I know what's going to happen at the very end for this piece of thing that I was inspired by Shorefall by. And I know that they are trying to do this. They are trying to figure out how they can take this down. How are they going to do that? And I also know that I want them to discover this being. I want them to go visit a being for this information, or to like help them on this journey for information. And so I started kind of connecting the dots and I ended up writing an entire summary for that one as well, which is so exciting because not only do I now have a very, very, very bare bones spine of this story, not a full skeleton, a spine. I now know plot points that I need to figure out, and like this has plot points in it for the book, which is perfect because that's really all I need before going in to write book 1, because I don't want to completely flesh out, this is what I've figured out, I don't want to completely flesh out what each book is going to be before I actually write book 1, because I know the way that I write stories, I'm probably going to want to change a lot of stuff plot-wise. So as long as I have the bones and I write book 1 to like see character and like learn about characters and stuff like that, then I'm going to come back to the bones of book 2 and then draft that one, and then bones of book 3 and draft that one, kind of like to do, I want to do it all at once, which is probably a really dumb idea, but like mostly at once. I want to craft the story as a whole before really honing in on the individual stuff so that it all works really well together as a blanketed story, and also that each individual story works really well on their own. That's the hope, that's the game plan. Anyways, did this tonight. Flipped the page over. I don't know what the main subgenre of book 3 is going to be. I feel like it's going to be very similar to book 2, like quest adventure. Yeah, I also wrote the summary of book 3, which came out of fucking nowhere. And it's less solid than book 1 and book 2 for sure, but it gave me a direction and it gave me possible plot points that I can play with. So I have my quick summaries written. I have the general idea of this story. I also started creating a character map the other day alongside my planning, because I realized that I'm going to need to know exactly how like the relationships between characters work and like who thinks what about who. And I need to know like their descriptions off the top of my head, because the series, I want to keep it very like cohesive and I want to make sure I'm not losing track of things as they happen. So I started doing a character Bible map type situation in Google Sheets. So I did that. And what is this video going to be? I'm going to do a little bit of research. I want like actually writing series. So I'm going to watch some videos online. I'm going to take notes. I'm going to do some exercises. And I want to actually start fleshing out this world, because this is not Arrowmount. This is the Kispasian Isles. And I don't know much about the Kispasian Isles. All I know is that there's a village in the Kispasian Isles that I have yet to name. And I also have yet to pick where it is in the Kispasian Isles, because the Kispasian Isles are quite large. They are quite large, you know? They traverse a lot of space, so it could be literally anywhere. I do already have 2 places named, Tenmar and Kenmar. They are places that I had named originally when I first built the map of Revar. So I don't know where this is going to be, but I know that there is a village in the Kispasian Isles made up entirely of pirates and their families. Retired pirates decided to retire in the Kispasian Isles. They decided, even though they were once all enemies on the open seas, there's like a level of camaraderie to being a pirate, even if you weren't part of the same ship. So a long time ago, like about 50 years ago, the first kind of pirates or whatever decided they were done with seafaring and they wanted to set up their own world, because they knew that they weren't going to be like accepted back on the mainland. So they decided to make their own village. And now that village is thriving because the pirates have just absolutely fantastic codes of living, and they are extremely protective of their own. And they're also like just in my head, it's going to be this really super vibrant pirate village that is not just like a bunch of old pirates in a corner. Like it's a bunch of people who have come together, and it's grown like organically and whatever, like with people who have traveled or people who've gotten like shipwrecked or lost or whatever. Like it's grown organically with people coming to this village as they've started doing like trade with fishermen and trade with posts and stuff like that. So like it's a legitimate village. And they've also like started having families and kids and everything. So there's multiple generations here. Some people who've never been pirates, but they're part of a pirate lineage. So they've been raised by pirates. So it's this whole thing. So I know that that is in the Caspasian Isles. And I know that that is where the majority of this shit is going to take place. I don't remember where I was going with this. Oh, I was just basically saying what I'm going to be doing in this video. Oh my god, it is 2:20 now. Oh, I need to go to bed. So we, in this video, are going to be really digging into the structure and skeleton of creating a series, and specifically a trilogy. And I'm going to be working through that to create a bare bones with some sinew and muscle structure for the story overall. And then I'm also going to flesh out the world and the magic system and the just kind of the environment and the vibes of this place. I'm going to world build it out a little bit more. I'm going to flesh it out and also play with like the characters and stuff like that, because I feel like it's going to be a very unique place, this pirate village, because it's going to be built from the pirates, and there's going to be like those original pirates still there in the town, because of course they're still living there. They're just now elderly people, and now they're like the matriarch and patriarch level of this of this village, and they're highly well respected, but they also are a little kooky because they're like the most piratey of piratey you can get. I'm gonna have so much fun with this pirate village. Anyways, so yeah, that's what this video is going to be. I have the very barest of skeletons to start from. I really don't have anything, do I? I have the barest of knuckle bones, essentially, right now. And I want to build these knuckle bones out into a full skeleton so that I can go forth from this moment and write these books, having a good idea of the whole trajectory of the story, because that's what I've learned about myself as a writer. Writing any book, especially with my cozy fantasies, A Little Luck in the Second Story, and the third one that's going to be coming out next year, I definitely, number one that I've learned about myself is that I need to know the ending before I start writing the book. And so because of that, and it literally can be very literally the end scene of a book, or it can be like where I want my characters to be by the end of the book, but usually it's just that end scene. I need to know what that end scene is before I can even start, and then I can figure out how they get there. So I'm taking that philosophy for myself, and I need to know the very end of this trilogy. I need to know how the last book ends and how they sort of kind of get there before I can actually start writing this book, or these books, I guess. Writing book one for sure. But I think it's gonna be fun. So this is the longest intro to ever, but yeah, we're working on Sage's story. I feel like also at some point I'm gonna like cover this with like a collage of some kind, just so that I can make this notebook more Sage's story appropriate, because right now the hummingbirds are just not doing it. But yes, I have 3 basic summaries. I have the knuckle bones of a story. You and me, my friend, we are going to make this into a full skeleton. We brought this bad boy back out again. It has been years, but I miss it. And we are doing some planning, some more planning in the journal that I have officially changed the cover up, which I like a lot more. And then today I went to Staples and I found this, and I like it so much. So this is going to be like a 2 notebook situation. I think I'm gonna start like writing scenes and shit and stuff in here, and then this one's gonna be more of like the planning, learning about series, note-taking one. But they're both for the Far Horizons trilogy. Guess what? That's what it's called. That's a low-key announcement. The trilogy is going to be called the Far Horizons trilogy. Book 1 still doesn't have a title. It used to be Far Horizons, but I don't have a title for it, so I probably need to write the book to actually find a title, because I feel like I need to actually explore what the story is, what it's about, what are the themes, what are, like, that's what I'm kind of doing now, but like actually writing it down, because usually it's through that I can find something that'll like work for a title. But now I have this beautiful baby. I'm so excited about it. Just love stationery. Anyways, yeah, we brought out Save the Cat again. It's been so long, and looking back through all my annotations, I destroyed this. This has been used and well loved in the past. It's been just a long time since I've reread and like updated my brain on like each of the individual story beats that are introduced in Save the Cat. I love this. Anyways, that's today's update. We're getting there. We are getting there on the brain. We're gonna start talking about the catalyst. Yay. I should have also clarified that this is book 1 specifically. I'm not doing the structure for the entire series at the moment. I'm focusing on book 1, even though this video is about finding out how to do a trilogy. It's fine. This is what my brain wants to do, so this is what we're doing. Hello, beautiful friends. It is officially April 11th, and I am feeling so fucking inspired. Oh my god, I don't know whether I'm now, like, honestly, I'm terrified now to not listen to the Writing About Dragons and Shit podcast run by B. Dave, Trevor, and Aaron M. Evans. I'm terrified. Every evening now, I have been putting that little podcast in my ears and listening to their wonderful, wonderful, wonderful voices, and I have been planning for this series. So much so, last night, I got into this, as I was explaining last night, I was doing like the Save the Cat beats, where I'm at, and the ideas that I'm getting for this first book in Sage's trilogy. I'm so inspired, and I can't wait to start writing this. Like, I've literally only reached point 4 and 5 of the catalyst and debate in the Save the Cat beat sheet, and I'm already like, can I just start writing? And I can't, because I need, as a writer, I know, I need to have a really solid ending in sight. What I need is an ending in sight for the end of the trilogy. And I do have one for the end of the trilogy, as I explained, I think, earlier in this video. I have a final image of the trilogy. But I need to know, I think, what... Okay, brain has too many ideas all at once. What am I trying to say? Before I start writing this book, I am going to continue on this journey of plotting it out very closely and intensely and asking myself questions and writing things down and adding myself little notes in the margins and just going at it very, very intensely, because I need book 1 to be very well shaped, because I also want to start plotting book 2. Less intensely than book 1, but like I want to know what book 2 is like in my head so far, so that I can get book 1 done, and then when I've finished drafting book 1, if anything has really changed, I can revisit book 2 and then like plan book 3. But because I have, I think this is just me talking back on myself a little bit, but because I have these 3 pages of basic, like, this is what happens in the book summaries, super basic, I have a plan and a structure, and like, as I said before, they're knuckle bones, right? These are just the knuckle bones of the skeleton. Right now, what I'm doing with book 1 is I am producing a skeleton with some muscles on it. What a morbid example, but you know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm doing right now. That's what I was doing last night, diving into the Save the Cat situation. I think because I'm stuck on book 1 right now, I'm gonna just keep doing that. And I've also done some world building stuff. I don't think I explained that. I did some world building stuff because Sheridan from TikTok, she's a wonderful writer on TikTok. She's doing a lot of stuff. She's currently querying her first book and like working on 2 new ones, one for herself and one with the TikTok community to like teach people how to like, how she writes and like how she plans and stuff. And she mentioned when she was doing some brainstorming videos for world building that there is a world building question of the day Tumblr page that has over like thousands and thousands of world building questions, now all compiled into a Google Doc, which I found online. And I have scrolled through a couple of them and used them as like bouncing off points to plan some of the world building stuff, which has been really interesting and a very, very lovely way, because I don't answer every single question. That would be so much. And some of them just don't mean anything to me. Like, I'll read it and I'll be like, no, I don't need to know that for my story. And I think one thing that I've learned now listening to the Writing About Dragons and Shit podcast is that you don't need to know everything about world building. And I think I've reached that point where, because previously, as I was like a couple years ago when I was like trying to world build Revar and stuff like that, I got too lost in the weeds. And I think learning from Brandon Sanderson back then when I did my like world building video a number of years ago, and learning from his like online lecture series, you don't need a lot of world building. You only really need what is pertinent to your story and what matters to your story. story. Like, you can come up with an entire religious structure if you want, but if it's not pertinent to your story, why, right? Why waste the time? But anyways, what I'm trying to say is the world within questions have been really helpful. So I've been picking ones that like kind of snag on my brain a little bit and like start unspooling ideas. So like the first one, for example, was how are the dead handled here? What's done with the dead? And that unspooled my brain for thinking about like, how do pirates get rid of their bodies? And then I did a little bit of research for pirates. There's not really much on pirates specifically, but like sailors back in the day would do like buried at sea, where they would like tie cannonballs as weights to the feet of a corpse and like drop it into the sea, or they would bury it on land if it was possible. So I was like, I pulled that in, and I'm like, because they're in a village that's on land now, what would they do to like adjust that belief and whatever? So it was just like pulling that out and like spilling it out, and it gave me an idiom that I went into, and I looked up like pirate code, like what's a pirate's moral code and stuff like that. It has been very, very, very interesting. And like the next question I did was, what is the liquor of choice or the drug of choice on this island? And that kind of spooled me out there. And like, are there any schools here? And then also like about kids and like gender and stuff. Like, do kids, what age do kids come of age on this little pirate island? And like, do they care about gender? And it's a resounding no. They're just like, be whoever you are. My pirates are very, very inclusive and very equality mindset, which I think is great, because the pirate code is a very interesting one. Anyways, so that's what I kind of did for that. And then the idiom kind of unlocked a little bit of something in me. I'm going to have to like pick at that scab for a second, because the idiom that I came up with is the sea calls to us all in the end. And it's going to be this like, I don't actually know if that's an idiom, but like, it's going to be this saying that a lot of pirates say on this island. And it's going to have little variations. Like some people will just be like, the sea calls. And some other people will be like, in the end. Like, it'll just be like little things like that. Or like the sea unites us all. Or the sea knows all, like little things like that they say that are just like intermeshed in their stuff. And I'm like, is that just a saying? Or is it something that might be hinting at something bigger world building wise? I haven't yet picked that scab, but it's there. And then I started the Save the Cat stuff. So what I'm learning is that I only really need to build out the world as to what I have, because it is in Revar. This has nothing to do with creating a series, but like, it's fine. It has everything to do with creating my series. Oh my God, I'm a mess today. I'm trying to like get all my thoughts together for you guys to make this video make any sense at all. But doing the Save the Cat thing and having listened to the Writing About Dragons and Shit podcast, something about it is just clicking in my brain. And I am pouring out stuff. I started listening to their villains episode last night, which was a very interesting episode about like how they craft villains and how they like consider villains as characters and how they bounce that off of the hero. And there's this through line through the podcast that B-Dave has said a few times, that it's like, what makes a hero is the sacrifice. Like, the bigger the hero they are, the more they've sacrificed. And so I wrote that to myself, like, what makes a hero is sacrifice. What did they give up? So that's something to think about for my people. There's also an interesting topic in the villains episode that Erin M. Evans brings up, that when she writes villains, they are usually mirrored in some way to the hero in some way. They're not an exact foil for the hero, but in some way. They mimic that, like, the want for it. So I was like, what if the villain mimics Sage's drive to succeed? And it's like, looking at the villain is looking at like what could go wrong with the hero, you know? And it's like, okay, that's kind of fun. So it just unspooled so much in my brain. I love it. And now I'm terrified to even look at this stuff without that podcast in my ears, because I, for some reason, have tricked my brain into thinking that I need that podcast in my ears to work on this, which is wrong. I can do it, but still. I've got the flaw. I've got my characters kind of coming together. I have a little bit of the villain's motive. I have all sorts of stuff, and I'm just loving building this story. My brain just really wants to work on it, and I love that. So I'm gonna keep working on book one specifically and pulling at it and like pulling out threads and trying to craft at least an outline, a pretty good solid skeleton and muscly outline for book one, and then I'm gonna go into book two. But I also really want to look at videos about how to write a series, because I found a few. There's actually not as many as I thought there was going to be, but I found a few that kind of talk about different things that you have to go through. And it is what I thought it was. It's like using the 3-act structure and stuff like that, but it's using the 3-act structure for the 3 books, especially with a trilogy, and like where the big moments of that overarching 3-act structure need to land, which makes a lot of sense. But then it's also like configuring the 3-act structure in each of the things. I think it's just a matter of me listening to and watching these videos and just like letting it unspool what it wants to unspool in my brain. I don't know, I'm having a lot of fun. And this is definitely going to be a really, really enjoyable little time with the Far Horizons trilogy. Bringing back the Save the Cat has been great. I'm not actually like reading it. I just have it and I'm like glancing at paragraphs to like kind of bring my brain together and like reformulate what I know about each of the beats of the Save the Cat, because I've built so many books off of Save the Cat and all that kind of stuff. So it's been really good for my brain, revisiting structure and listening to authors talk about writing. It's been good, and I'm really happy that my brain is so ready to go with this story. I don't know what it is. I'm just so excited about it. And I also really want to start thinking about like the actual place of the Caspasian Isles, because I need to create some lore about the Caspasian Isles. I have like the inklings of lore in my brain noggin in my brain noggin about the Caspasian Isles, because I've never dabbled in this area before. I'm so excited about it though. I'm gonna start thinking about like caverns and stuff and dragons and stuff. Ooh, I'm excited. That's the update. I just wanted to get this word vomit out to you. I fucking love it. Oh God. Planning a series, I didn't realize I was gonna love this much. Like I wanted to write a series with Project Dream. I started writing book 2 at some point with Project Dream, and I just never finished that first draft or continued with it. And I think coming at a series in the way that I'm doing it with Far Horizons is that because I want to, with my publishing plan, I want to publish each of these books in relatively close succession so that like you guys get the whole trilogy all at once. There's also been a really tiny little voice in my brain that's like, what if you try to traditionally publish this trilogy? Which is not the point of this trilogy, but that's fine. It's just this tiny little voice in my brain that's bothering me. Far Horizons. I'll talk to you guys later. Yeah, that's the update. Hello, beautiful people. It has been a hot second since I last talked to you. I'm going to apologize now for the state of my voice. For some reason, this has just become more and more congested throughout the day. I think I'm being affected by spring allergies for the first time in my life. I have yet to actually fucking do what I planned out to do at the beginning of this video, which is to learn how to write a fucking trilogy. I feel like I have. I feel like I've kind of figured it out on my own, but I have not yet built the skeleton for the whole arc of this story. What I have been focusing on recently is the first book's arc and details, building that plot out with the Save the Cat beat sheets outlined in the best book ever. And in doing that, I've done so much. I don't remember the last thing I talked to you guys about, but so I have all of Act 1 figured out, and then some of Act 2 figured out. Yeah, because Act 2 is always the biggest act. But yeah, we have Act 1, and then Act 2 starts here, and then I got partway through Act 2, and I was like, I need to figure out how to do mysteries. So I did that. I looked up some videos online of like trying to see, or like even just information online of like trying to see if anyone knew how to like had a beat sheet for a mystery book, or like had any information on like outlining a mystery book. And I didn't really find anything specific about mystery, but cozy mystery came up. And so I watched that anyways, even though I'm not writing a cozy mystery. I figured it would still be beneficial to see how that's plotted, to see how like the clues are distributed and like how it's balanced. That was really helpful because I did that, and then I reread The Empire of Exiles. I don't know if I mentioned that in this video, but you guys have probably seen it in a couple of my vlogs. I read The Empire of Exiles early in April, and then I read The Housemaid by Frida McFadden, and then right after that I reread The Empire of Exiles. So I read The Empire of Exiles back to back in 6 days in less than a week. I read it twice. And why did I do that? Because it is a fantasy mystery, and I needed to know how it was constructed, and I needed to see how Erin M. Evans like did the whole unspooling of the mystery in her book. And it was so helpful to do after having watched that video, which is by A.N. Sage. After watching that video and taking a few notes on it, like taking mostly Act 2 and 3 notes in this book about writing a mystery specifically, and then reading a fantasy mystery and seeing those things come to light was very interesting. Like, not all of them, obviously, because cozy mystery has its own tropes, but like seeing how the clues were distributed, the like interview portions of stuff, and like where things would twist and turn and like that kind of a thing, so important for my brain. Really needed that. So then I went back through the next day after I finished rereading An Empire of Exiles and like marking it up and tabbing it up and studying it essentially. I went back through and I jotted down how many like main theories were brought up from what I could like quickly do as I was running through it. And there were 6. And then I jotted down how many clues there were and like reveals and clues kind of tie into each other. Like physical clues that they find obviously can like lead to reveals, which is very interesting. And I caught at least 15. Number 9 was the midpoint turn, which is very interesting. And then I also went through and like wrote on, I should be showing you, wrote on little sticky notes and stuff, different things that I needed to remember. I had things like the debate, like contemplating what they know is part of that debate. And then I really liked the way that Empire of Exile cycles back to the beginning at the end. I love a cyclical nature of like something that happens at the beginning of Empire of Exiles. Really like that like cyclical nature of that. I love when that happens. It just feels so satisfying. Like this is something that you're supposed to do at the beginning and you made a choice that changed it, and then you do it again at the end, but you make a different choice and it has a different outcome. I really like that like cyclical nature of things. So I wrote that down. All sorts of stuff, like important clues and like things that I need to know for clues. And then I started making clues up in my brain. But before I could even fucking do that, I needed to figure out who my villain was. And so I have this other journal. I decided to just go back into my notes in my computer for what I thought up originally for this magic system that I have that is going to be the villain's magic. I knew I wanted it to surround souls, but be necromancy based. And I wanted it to be something on the edge of forbidden, like necromancy is kind of on the edge of forbidden in Rivar, but it's not. It's just very rare. And it's a type of sorcerer that like can reanimate the dead, essentially. That's basically what it is. My villain is different. My villain pushes the boundaries of that. And so I decided to look up specifically like quotes from literary stuff about souls to see if that would like jog anything in my head. And so there's a soul quote from Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy that is, rummaging in our souls, we often dig up something that ought to have lain there unnoticed. And then there was another one from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations that is, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. And I thought these were both very, very interesting, and they like sparked just an explosion of brain on these pages. So I did that. I kind of honed in on the magic itself and like the elements of it and like the casing of the magic, not necessarily like all of the little things with the magic. And there was another sticky note that I wrote basically like asking myself questions about the villain, because I had decided the villain was a certain way back when I was originally getting the brainwaves for this project. And then I was like, but what if that's too similar to this that I'm also kind of basing her magic off of, that I know like it's a media thing that I'm like leaning into with her magic and her character as a whole. I don't want it to be too similar. So then I changed it to a different person, like a different reason as to why she's the way she is. And then I was like, but what if it's different? So then it's like different from that again. So I changed my mind twice with the villain. And then I wrote who is, and then I wrote down the villain's name. And then I wrote down where they're from, their full name. And then just a brief, like little itty bitty description, like an extremely blank, 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 outwardly blank, blank. I don't want to spoil you guys. Puts on a mask, blank, 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 etc. And then I started writing their backstory. So it was just like, born in Deliar to fairly normal parents, blah, 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 blah. And then that spiraled into me basically almost wanting to change my mind on this entire project and just write her story, because it got really cool. But it's backstory, it's fine, it all makes sense, because I needed to really dig into the reasons as to why the villain is the way that they are and their motivations for doing what they are going to be doing in this book and into the next books, and like what their overall goal is, right? So I did that. I wrote so much of their backstory. I get to the point of like when the villain comes to this place that my book is set and like what they do there and like all this kind of stuff that has to do with that. And that kind of unlocked a little bit of like world building in my head, and it kind of brought up some elements of like what happens after book one and like what their overarching goal is like in its entirety. I was like, oh, this is so great, because that then helps me build an arc for the entire series, right? It's gonna all help in the end. And then that unlocked a need to create what I've now termed as the Lost Gods, only for one very specific reason. So because it's only one very specific reason, I wanted to do it really, really fast and not spend too much time in it, because you only should do as much world building as you need to answer specific questions that come up in your story. You only need to do the amount of world building that is helpful to your story, and don't do it all before you start the story. Do exactly what you need at the very beginning to start writing, and then as you write, make notes of what you may need to figure out later, because the first draft is just you telling you the story, and you can fill out the meat and the bones after. That is my recommendation to you, because I have gotten lost in the weeds of world building before, and it's not a place you want to be. It's very fun. It is one of my favorite things, brainstorming and creating a world and all this kind of stuff, but it's not where you want to be. It's not helpful for getting the words on the page and writing that goddamn book, okay? So I did that. It's a page. I created 4 new gods and like what their domain is and how they're tied to the gods, because previously, when I was building Revar a number of years ago for Project Dragon, I had created old gods and new gods. And the old gods are more centered in the Nerian Empire, which is where Project Dragon exists. And then the new gods are the ones that like cause the Centurion, and the Centurion is a war between, like, the mortals understand it as a war between the gods and the mortals, but it was really a war between the new gods and the old gods. These lost gods are part of the old gods, but they were cut off from their buddies in the Nerian Empire and were punished more harshly than the ones that like kind of escaped into the safety of the Nerian Empire. Anyways, so I needed to create them and create their domains, because they are not like the big gods. They are the gods of deceit and manipulation. They're the gods of envy, the gods of curiosity, the gods of pollution, and like things like that, like things that aren't necessarily good and aren't aligned neutral or good. They are all chaotic, which or pollution actually is lawful evil, which I think is very fun. Anyways, so created that. And then I was like, great, awesome. I know what the crime mystery situation that the people are going to be figuring out in book 1 is. I know what's going on. I don't necessarily know like the super details of it yet. I would need to figure that out, but I know a lot of it. And so I was like, great, okay, what are the clues that my people find? And I just brain vomited onto this page in no particular order. And then when I like had finished draining my brain of all the clues I could figure out, I numbered them in like a order that would make sense as to like how they would appear in the narrative and like when they would find them. So like 1 to 9 or whatever. I don't actually know how many there are. I only numbered 1 to 5. And then there's more on the second page that I didn't number. That's fine. So I did that. And all throughout this as well, I started thinking about the magic more here for the necromancer. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned this in this video. I mentioned it in a vlog for sure, but I then got the idea for the cover. It's gonna be hopefully in my brain. It's a full image wrap. It's gonna be like a beautifully illustrated tones of like an old fantasy novel cover, but like with my amazing cover artist's vibe. It's gonna be so good. I can see it in my head right now, and it's the best. This makes no fucking sense to anybody but me. And I needed to write it down because I thought of it at like 4 a.m. and I was like, I'm gonna forget this if I don't. Anyways, then I went back to more world building because I needed to just pull on something. So I went back to that Tumblr page, Google Doc thing, and then I got stuck on only one specific thing, which is what is the terrain like in your setting, which was very, very helpful, because then I went and started researching specific different climates and biomes of the earth, and I was like, what biome would this little island be set in? The Brenham Empire in my head has a climate like Canada does, which is the whole Brenham Empire here. And then the Manad Empire, which stretches down this way, is more desert. So I was like, this is where the Caspasian Isles are. They're more adjacent to the Canadian parts, so they can't be tropical, right? Because that doesn't make sense with the biomes of the realm. It's gotta be warm, but not tropical. What the fuck is that? And somehow I stumbled upon the Isles of Scilly, and I don't think that's how you say it. Is it Scilly? Scilly? Who knows? Off the coast of Europe. Because of the way that these islands are laid out, they are a microclimate, so that it is like not quite as warm as the Caribbean. It is sunny enough to grow tropical plants. And I was like, that is exactly it. That is exactly it. And like some of the sides of the island feel like Scotland vibes. They're very craggy. They're very like lots of cliffs and stuff. And so I was like, these islands, the Isles of Scilly, are so cool. So I started researching that and writing notes down to like inform and inspire what my island is going to be like. And then I did that for a little while, which also gave me more characters, because I started thinking of like, what grows in the Isles of Scilly, because there's a whole thing in here with the mystery. It's like whatever the thing, what's happening at the beginning involves livestock. What kind of livestock would there be on this place? Like that kind of a thing. So it was very important, and I started building out like the flora of the island. And then I went back to plotting again, which was mainly yesterday's situation, and I plotted Act 2 all the way to the midpoint, which was great because not only was I coming up with like scene ideas that would come like after another and like choices that they would do, I was placing the clues and then also making decisions on like, this is going to be a multi-POV book now. It's not just going to be Sage, because there's enough of a story here that I need more moving pieces than just Sage to tell the story. And so because of that, I went and I picked 2 more POV characters, main POV characters, and I had to figure out their motives and their story and what they want, because they need to have their own story in this as well, which thus gave me more scene ideas for the end of this book and for like movement in this book and more clue ideas, which is all fantastic. And so I did that last night as well. More character stuff, you know, and more plotting. We're right to the midpoint now, which is very exciting. And now I'm at the point where my brain is like, do I just start writing this now and then figure out the second half of the book when I get there? And then I'm like, no, I told the vlog I was going to figure out how to write a trilogy first. So what I'm gonna do, not today, because it is already past 2 a.m. on a Sunday night. I do have to work tomorrow, but not today. I'm not doing this today. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot the rest of this book. I'm going to watch these videos that I keep saying I'm going to watch and like make notes and like do big thinking things for like the big arc of the story. Once I have book 1 like solidly defined, I think I can also start thinking about the trajectory of book 2, because I have, as you guys remember from the beginning of this video, I have basically like very, very, very preliminary plot vibes for book 1, book 2, and book 3. Prelim plot vibes. I know how I want this story to, like, I know the very, 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 very last scene, and I know like the last lines. I know what they're gonna say. I know it's good. I know what the vibes are gonna be. I know how the image is in my head. I just need to know how to get there. And I need to know more about book 2 and book 3 before I really dive into actually writing these books. But I think I'm so close to it now, because now that I'm like really digging into the meat and potatoes of this and like discovering things about the world and like actually digging into characters and scenes and stuff, I don't want to get too bogged down in the weeds of this. I just want to start writing this. We are going to finish plotting book 1. That's what we're going to do. And because the plotting of it, as I'm doing it here, it's just making my brain light up with happiness. It's fantastic. I love doing this. I love plotting. I love like figuring and finagling and like making sure the scenes are in the right spot and like that kind of a thing. Because then when I actually go to write it, I will, as I write it, know the flow better. So like maybe things will change in that, whatever. I just need to finish plotting book 1. And then I can look at the skeleton in book 2 and then kind of know how the trajectory is going to go into book 3. Because from what I understand about writing trilogies, I've listened to enough of writing about dragons and shit that I know they mentioned it in their one episode about writing series that book 1 has to stand fairly well on its own if you're going to trad pub, because what if you don't sell book 2 and 3, right? Book 2 and book 3 can saddle into each other, but I do not want the dreaded middle book syndrome. I do not. I've mentioned that in this video. So I've also learned from the vague searching that I did at the beginning of this video that each book needs to have its own concise story that does wrap up within that like also sets up for the next book. And I think I have enough of a plot in my head for the second book that should be fine. I feel like what I actually need to do is write book 1 so that I can find out where my characters are emotionally at the end of book 1 and like how their wants and fears and things change before going into book 2, because that's going to determine the personal arcs of book 2. But at least we can get the plot points down, you know? The skeleton can be there, but everything else can come with writing it. Anyways, that's the update, my friends. That's where we are with the Far Horizons trilogy. Book 1 is plotted to the midpoint. I have sketched out the villains' backstory, who they are and their motivations. I have sketched out the clues and the things, and I have an idea in my head about the ending of this book. I just need to actually put it onto paper in a proper way that makes sense, because a lot of what is in my head is just swirling puzzle pieces for the end of this book. I just need to get there, you know? I need to figure out like what my characters choose to do, how they move forward, that kind of a thing. Put that on a page, and then I can start actually working on this. That's the update as of April 21st, technically 22nd because it is 2 a.m. See you later. Hello, beautiful friends. It is officially May 8th today. For the past couple weeks, I haven't really been like super focused on this story, on the Far Horizons trilogy, but I've been consistently listening to Writing About Dragons and shit, and I've also been thinking and noodling about this story, you know? So I wanted to kind of also come in, and I think I'm gonna split this video apart because it is already quite long. So what have we got as to this moment? Where I'm at now, as of May 8th, I've almost finished this notebook up, by the way. I have literally there's just like little baby pages left. We have made it to the moment in my plotting for book 1. I have made it to the moment where everything is starting to hit the fan. So 75% mark, roughly around there. I've kind of given up on the Save the Cat proper beats at this point. I am just writing what happens. Scene by scene by scene by scene. Like this happens, this happens, this happens, this clue comes in, that kind of a thing. I have also had a really great time. I mean, I did up to like bad guys closing in and then just kind of let my brain loose. Just let my brain have fun with things. I've been having a great time with pulling together the other POVs now that I'm thinking about having multiple POVs in this story. And it's not just Sage, right? It's not just her story now. It is, like, I mean, she's my main character, she's my main girly, but having the other two POV characters and their wants and their needs and their decisions and things like that in my head, not only because I figured out, like, I actually went through and wrote down backstory and their fears and their wants and like their motivations and stuff, just like a very, very prelim. I think I did like 3 pages of writing for each one. 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. Just kind of little things like that. Bringing them in my mind and starting to get more familiar with them because I'm so familiar with Sage. She is a character that I've had in my head for so long. Just like Ari and Finn, she started as an idea for a D&D character. I've never been able to play Sage as a D&D character, but she's been in my head for a really long time. So I know her very well. So I need to know these other 2 POV characters as well. Even though they're not like as big as Sage is gonna be, they have very crucial parts to play in this story. I think it's gonna be very interesting to have them balanced in this plot once I actually start writing the draft and getting that out of my brain, because then I will actually be able to find out and pull at like who they are more. Anyways, so yes, I have made it to about the 75% mark of the plot itself. At this point now, they know what's happening, who did it, and it's a matter of saving this village because something is about to happen. And I just want to tell you guys everything, but I can't because spoilers. But yeah, so I've like gotten to this point where I feel like I could now it's been a little while since I've touched this last bit of the book, but I feel like the amount of time that I've been listening to the Writing About Dragons and Shit podcast and like thinking about this and noodling over things and coming up with like just vibes and thinking about it, just having it in my head is so beneficial. I feel like now where I'm at, I'm going to take Yield Noggin and like actually focus in on this a little better and finish plotting book 1. There's also an episode. I'm pointing this way because I was listening to it on my Google speaker today when I was at work. The episode that I'm on right now is called Trilogies, and I am gonna go listen to that, even though I feel like where I'm at now, because I know I set out at the beginning of this video to like figure out how to write a proper trilogy. I kind of know now. I think what I need to do going forward and what I have done in this past video, I feel like I know where I'm going. I'm taking the advice that I've brought up many times in this video from B. Dave and Aaron and Trevor, and also in that like really early clip where I talked about making every single book its own like subgenre. So what I'm gonna do going forward and what I've learned, what I think I've learned, is 1, writing a trilogy, you want book 1 to stand on its own as if you were going into traditional publishing. Because I am planning on doing this as self-publishing, I don't really have to think of it that way, but I'm going to take that idea of like having book 1 stand on its own, and I'm gonna make every single story in this series stand very well on its own, even though they're all connected, even though it's the same storyline all the way through, because I don't want my middle book, my second book, to have the bridge book, the middle book syndrome, you know? So what I'm taking that nugget of advice of like having book 1 stand on its own and kind of spreading it throughout all 3 books so that each of the books have a very centered plot. They each have their own thing going on even though each one sets up for the next one, obviously, because it's all the same story, it's all the same antagonists, it's all that kind of stuff. Taking that, and then also the advice from that one video or blog post or whatever I found this from at the very beginning, where someone said, like, make each book have its own subgenre. I have that for book 1 and book 2, as you saw at the beginning of this video. Book 1 is a fantasy mystery, book 2 is going to be a quest. Book 3, as of yet, I don't know. I feel like I could bring in horror elements, which is very interesting. I don't know why my brain is telling me that, but I feel like book 3 is going to have its own, like, trajectory of its own subgenre when I get there, because I don't know it yet. But I think that's what I'm going to try and do going forward, is I'm going to treat each one of these books in this series, even though I am going to also write all of it almost at once. I'm going to work on book 1 until I feel comfortable with the story, and then I'm going to go into book 2 until I feel comfortable with the story, and then book 3 and finalize that before I come back and work the whole thing over and over again. That's the plan, that's the hope, that's the dream, because I want to make sure that if I figure out something in book 3 that needed to be there in book 1, that book 1 isn't already published and out and I can't change it, you know? I want to make sure that I have everything at my disposal for my trilogy happenings so that I can really do this story justice. And because of that, I want each story to be very solid on its own, have its own very strong structure, very strong story trajectory, all that good stuff. So that is what I've learned in my noggin of noggins during this journey of just chaos, really. It's just been chaos, this video. Has there been a point to it? I think the point, now that we've reached the end of this first installment of creating Sage's story, or creating the Far Horizons trilogy, now that it has a name and now you guys know it. This is just the brainstorming video. That's what this ended up just being. Brainstorming and planning the Far Horizons trilogy's knuckle bones. I love that I started with that metaphor. We started with the knuckle bones, and I think now book 1 has a fairly solid skeleton, but it's missing its feet at the moment because I need the ending. It's the skeleton is there. I just need to figure out how to put the foot bones on it, and I think we'll be good. So I have one skeleton nearly complete, like 90% complete. I have the knuckle bones and spine of book 2, and then I have the knuckle bones of book 3. So from here on, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to wrap up listening to the trilogy's episode of Writing About Dragons and shit. I'm gonna go into the end of this book, first book. I'm going to plot the end of it, the last 25% or however much there is left of the story to tell myself. And then I am going to start drafting book 1 before I even touch book 2. Why? Because I have that little summary that I did at the beginning for book 2. I have what I want this story to be written down. I know what that's going to be. Do I know how it's going to work or the actual skeleton of it yet? No. But I want draft 1 of book 1 to be done so that I can reach, as I mentioned earlier, the emotional point of where my characters are going to be at the end of book 1 so that I can decide on their journey into book 2. So that's what we're going to do from here, my friends. I'm going to end this video here. Thank you for joining me for this chaos brainstorming session of figuring out where I'm going with the Far Horizons trilogy, using Save the Cat once again. We've plotted, we've thought about things, we've done some world building, we've created some characters, and this is actually a really good look at how organically my brain works when I'm coming up with a story from the ground up. This is my brainstorming that I do, of where it goes from beginning to end, creating the story, coming up with ideas, how things kind of spark and unravel, asking myself questions. I am leaving a stack of links down below for you guys if you want any of the resources that I've talked about in this video. We have the AN Sages videos that I talked about. I have the old world building videos that I did when I followed the Brandon Sanderson stuff. I also have a link to the world building Tumblr page that I found through Sheridan. I'm also going to leave Sheridan's YouTube down below because she's awesome, and she's also put the content from her TikTok in longer form on her YouTube. So definitely go check out Sheridan. This video started out as me being like, we're gonna just kind of see if I can figure out how to write a series. Did I figure out how to write a series? I think so. I have a good plan of where I'm going from here. I also brainstormed the hell out of my Far Horizons trilogy and coming up with book 1. It is literally the most detailed I have been with an outline since I wrote a second story. So I think this is going to be a great time. I think drafting this is going to be so fun. I don't know how long it's going to take me because these aren't cozy books. I feel like I should have said that at the beginning. This is not going to be a cozy fantasy series. This is high fantasy. This is piratey. This is a fantasy mystery. This is dark, okay? There's gonna be some crazy shit in here. I'm getting back into the kind of fantasy that I wrote before I dove into my cozy fantasy world with my Airmount series with A Second Story and A Little Luck that are out in the world now. Even though this follows a character from A Second Story, follows Sage, this is not cozy. It might be heartwarming, it might be soft and sweet in some moments because I just love to add that element in, but this is also going to be quite dark. I don't know if you caught on halfway through when I talked about necromancy. The villain is very exciting. Love my villain so much, and I'm so excited to start playing with her. I cannot wait to start writing this. So the plan going forward in the next writing vlog for Sage's story, when you see this, I'm going to be drafting book 1, and then after that it's probably going to be planning book 2. That's the idea anyways. So I'm so excited to tell you guys all about it and to show you guys all of it when I have something to show you more than just my rambling that probably didn't make any sense to anyone but me, because I live in my own brain and I know where this story is going from here. But anyways, my beautiful friends, thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in another video very, very, very soon. Let me know down below how excited you are for the Far Horizons trilogy. Let me know also what you think of the name of this trilogy. I would love to know. Let me know down below your guess as to who the other POV characters are. There's 2 others for sure, and you already know them from A Second Story. So let me know who you think they are going into this lovely trilogy. Anyways, my friends, I'll catch you in another video very soon. Stay kind and keep on writing.